For those of you who actually do play League of Legends and watch my stream regularly for when I do show myself playing the game, you may know, or maybe you don't know, I don't know, that recently Riot decided to remake Twisted Treeline. They completely overhauled the map and added a bunch of new features to it. I've decided I'm going to take this opportunity to go give you a bit of an overview of what they did with the map and give you my thoughts on it. Now, for those not familiar with League of Legends, it's a MOBA game, and the Twisted Treeline was its attempt at creating a 3 versus 3 map. Normally, the game is 5 versus 5, but this game wanted to create a game mode where it would be more fast-paced, shorter games, and ultimately just a quicker experience overall. Unfortunately, it sort of failed to do that. The map wasn't that popular. It was kind of interesting for the most part, but it failed to deliver in any real regard and couldn't trump Summoner's Rift in terms of popularity or interest. So Riot decided to remake the whole thing and try to make it more unique and make it a bit more balanced. And honestly, they did a fairly good job overall. For one, the overhaul included upscaling the graphics and redesigning the place to look a lot nicer, and it really does look quite good. The artistic design here is well executed, and it gives a sort of dark, shall we say, evil approach, which is good because I'm pretty sure the Twisted Treeline is supposed to be located on the Shadow Isles, which is an area in the League of Legends lore that some of you probably don't care about. In any case, on top of making this map look better, they've also redesigned it. They've basically gotten rid of the top jungle, which existed before, leaving only a mid jungle with 2 lanes on opposite sides. The only thing in the top area is the boss monster, which I'll get to later. The jungle creeps have also been redesigned to fit the mood, where before they were just rehashes of stuff you'd see in Summoner's Rift. It makes the map more unique, and makes the whole feel and look of the map more aesthetically pleasing. You will notice, or some of you may not notice, I don't know, that some of the buffs have been removed, and this is done for a reason. Before, there were different unique buffs in Twisted Treeline, but none of them really came into play too often. Those have all been removed, and instead replaced with new things. Instead of the jungle creeps carrying buffs that you kill them to obtain, instead you stand on these altars, and there's one on each side of the map, one for each team. However, the other team can go over and steal the other altar from the other team. What the altars do is, as long as you possess at least one of them, you'll get +4 gold for every creep you kill. If you own 2, you get +8. This is an excellent way of balancing out the map and creates a more need to get the buffs. Before, you never really wanted to go get the buffs. There was never a need to do it, and most games that I played in the original Twisted Treeline basically ignored their existence. Now teams are actively fighting over these altars because the extra gold is a big game changer. Most of the game is actually spent trying to make sure you have the altars and getting creeps at the same time, so you get a gold boost over your enemies. It gives you an edge, and a big one over time. They've also changed the layout of the middle jungle to try to make it less, shall we say, easy to escape. Riot themselves claim that before what would happen is that it was really easy to flash over walls. They've widened a lot of them so this is not as easily done, therefore making it so that teams have to fight each other more often. It makes it a more action-esque map and makes the gameplay move along a lot faster. I mentioned the boss monster earlier. They replaced the original dragon, who was named Ebenmaw, with this new spider-like thing called the Vilemaw. It's a much more well-designed monster, less rehashy, and fights more uniquely and looks pretty good, again fitting the theme of the map. He actually puts up a really tough fight, and you usually need your entire team in order to take him on properly, unless you have very specific team members. His buff doesn't last nearly as long as Baron Nashor's, who you were probably familiar with from Summoner's Rift, but it's still a necessary thing to get if you want an edge over the other team. Something else that's fought over a lot. I like the design up here because there's easy access from both sides, so each team can come in from one end and end up fighting over who's going to fight the giant spider, sometimes aggroing the thing and getting the spider to kill them all at the same time. It, again, makes the whole map more action-esque and makes for a more interesting gameplay. There are also unique items specifically made for this map. That's definitely something new. The only other mode that ever did that was Dominion. The original Twisted Treeline never did this, and this is done for a reason. One of the problems the original Twisted Treeline has is some of the builds for certain champions needed specific items, and these items were just flat out too expensive because the games were shorter. So it was really difficult to get big items such as Rabadon's Death Cap, and oftentimes champions would be left without them. To combat this, they've gone in and replaced a bunch of different items, and I think added a few new ones in order to change up the game mode a bit. For example, there's no more Rabadon's Death Cap, instead replaced by a different Death Cap that only costs a needlessly large rod to build into, thus making it more easy to get. The buff you get from it isn't quite as big as Death Cap's, but because this game mode is more fast-paced, that doesn't really mean anything, and it's still a great item to get. They've also removed Site Wars, which I actually kind of like because it means it's more team-based, and again, it's way easier to gank now, which means you have to be more on your toes about it because you don't have wards to put down, and they've replaced Wriggle's Lantern, which used to have a built-in ward, with a different lantern that instead will make one area of the map of your choosing revealed for a short time. And by short time I mean like 5 seconds. It's basically the replacement for wards, and it doesn't really help that much, but still, it's not a bad item either. None of the new items are bad. They're unique and different, and I'm not really sure they'd ever be viable in Summoner's Rift, but most of them do work for the Twisted Treeline. I think over time people will start developing new builds for champions using the new items in Twisted Treeline for specific situations, but again, only testing and repeated playthroughs will help enhance that and make that possible. There are, of course, a few issues, and again, I should stress that Twisted Treeline is in beta, so I can't really say that it's perfect, because it's really not. For one thing I didn't mention about the middle jungle is that there's this speed buff in the middle of the place. I don't really know why. It really doesn't affect anything. It really doesn't help. It really doesn't make anything worse. I really don't understand why it's here at all, actually, quite frankly. It's pretty pointless. I mean, I guess you could you could take it out and then nobody would really care, and you could leave it there and would just question its purpose, because really using it is not really that useful. It doesn't really help. The only thing it really helps with is being able to run around and gank faster, which, okay, yeah, there's that, but really, how often does that happen? I don't like it. I wish it was gone, quite frankly. Another problem is that I feel that Riot's intended meta here is not being exploited. See, I think what Riot wants is that both lanes will be 1v1, and there'll be 2 junglers, one from each team, in the center jungle running around and ganking. That's not what's happening, though. In the games I've been playing, what I've seen is 1v1 top and 2v2 bot. Nobody's in the jungle. Now, the lanes tend to switch around, and people tend to move up and down lanes, ganking a lot, sure, but there's no straight-up jungler, and in fairness, I can see why that would be a problem, because there's a problem with the lack of buffs. See, certain junglers, for example Skarner, are kind of buff-dependent. Early game Skarner needs blue, for example. There's no blue on Twisted Treeline. That's kind of a big deal. In fairness, once again, it's smaller, so you can gank more quickly, and there's less jungle creeps to kill, so I guess I can't sit here and say that he's completely useless. He's not, but making a straight-up jungler in this map would be incredibly difficult, and I don't really know how that would work out too well. You'd have to be ganking constantly, and again, I'm pretty sure that's what they want you to do, but that's not what people are doing. Granted, the map is new, and maybe the meta hasn't really been firmly established yet, but I feel like right now, people aren't using the way the map should be intended, but is that a problem? I don't know. It really depends what you want. I mean, the game mode works overall, but honestly, I feel like it's not quite up to what they want to do. They're looking for smaller games and faster, more action-oriented games, but the problem is that it's very restrictive like this. 3v3s make certain classes of people unviable. Certain champions you just wouldn't use, like most of the supports, like Sona, or Janna, or Soraka. Unless you're building the straight-up AP, you'd never use these champions on this map, simply because they don't have a purpose. Supports don't exist here. You don't have a character that's running around just putting wards and healing people. That's not what you have on this map, so supports are out of the question. Junglers are kind of out of the question. I mean, some junglers are weaker on this map, some are okay, but straight-up junglers don't exist here. So really, every team comp should really consist of one AD ranged, one AP carry, and one tank/bruiser. I've seen this combination a few times, and it's the only one that seems to be, well, good. Because why would you do anything else? Like, you can use straight tanks, sure, and support tanks work fine, such as Alistar or Blitzcrank, But again, you'd always need the AP and the AD carries, because if you don't have have one of each of those, you're going to get countered with certain armor types. Again, it makes the teams very, very restrictive. Could you say that Summoner's Rift is restrictive? Well, I suppose so, because every person has to go into a certain role, and there are 5 roles as opposed to here there are only 3. And could you say that you could have things like a jungler and a support? Well, yeah, but I doubt they'd win that way. I've seen people use supports on this map, and let me tell you, it hasn't ended well. But again, is that really a problem? I guess not, because, well, you know, it's supposed to be different, and in fairness, it is. And you know what? It's a ton of fun. The map looks nice, the music's pretty cool, and it's fun to play. If you're looking for a short game, you know, that's what you'll get out of this. The games usually don't last very long. Of course, I did have one game that lasted over an hour, but that was an exception, not the rule. Overall, I'd say the map is pretty good, and if you haven't given Twisted Treeline a chance, definitely give it a try now, especially if you have given it a try and you didn't like it in the past, because you might like the changes that were made. The map overall is definitely improved, and I look forward to seeing what changes Riot makes in the future. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.